Excellent. You can all see the slides up in front of you?
Can.
Fantastic. Okay, good morning and welcome to the Mentor Education Business Insight series, where our goal is to provide real-world insight into the business environment, some tools, tips and strategies that you can implement as a business owner, as somebody involved in business or in your day-to-day life to respond to, well, certainly what at the moment is an ever-changing environment. Today is all about hoisting your swimwear in turbulent business waters. It's a funny title, yes, but it is a very, very serious topic and certainly one that we should all be paying attention to, irrespective of what industry or what capacity of business we're in. With me today, I have Dr. Mark Sinclair, Iona McKimmie, and Dr. Jim Taggart. Mark, welcome to today's webinar. Would you take a couple of moments just to introduce yourself and provide a little bit of background?
Thanks, James. Look, started Mentor Education in 2003, but prior to that, I was at KPMG and AT Kearney, specialising in strategic management for companies like Telstra, Reserve Bank, CBA and the like. Mentor Education has been a passion for me because I really wanted to make sure we brought real life experience, great job outcomes and terrific training and assessment resources to our students. And over the last 18 years, I'm really proud to see that we've grown our cohort to nearly 5,000 online students. It's really exciting.
Fantastic. And handing on over to you, Iona.
Hi, James. Welcome. Thank you very much for having me here today. As my title says, I'm the CEO of Mentor Education, and I've been working in the training and education industry for around 25 years, bit longer, and also working with engineering consultancies, and I have a background in project management. So hoisting your swimwear is something that we come across, and I'm looking forward to talking about it with you today.
Excellent. And last and by no means least, and a man who really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to ask for one anyway, Dr. Jim Taggart.
Oh, thank you very much, James. Welcome, and a very warm welcome, and I mean that to everyone. I'm excited about today's topic. Business is a very different paradigm, and today's webinar is going to get you to think about your business in very turbulent times. I'm very excited about it, and I'm very, very touched by the generosity of experience that will share with you some very, very significant attributes and some decision-making steps to help your business. So I'm very excited, James.
Excellent. Now I'm going to get you to stay with me and talk to us about the title of this first image that we've got up here in front of you, and that's your swimwear and the 3-metre swell. So I dare say we're going to lean on the title of today's webinar and live presentation quite a lot, and use it as a bit of a launching pad to explain some of the business concepts and some of the ideas and strategies that we can implement in order to be prepared for a changing business environment. So the 3-metre swell, I mean, I could turn up to the beach tomorrow and things could be very different to the way they were yesterday. Talk to me about that.
Well, it's interesting because in business, we make a lot of assumptions, and those assumptions have a very big impact as drivers on the energy and the key development of your business. When you carry that analogy to looking at the beach, as when we go to it, is a place that we have great excitement. But implicit in all of that is the unknown. Under the water, on top of the water, the skills of the people around you, the lifeguards, all of that plays an important role in you enjoying yourself. But at the same time, you need to be very, very aware of all those environmental factors. What have you done? What do you continue to do? And what do you do in a time of crisis? Who comes to you? Who leaves you? Who can't help you in those times? And for some people, at the moment, they can handle 3-metre swells. For many businesses, a 1-metre swell will make them obsolete. So the point that I'm looking at and trying to say within here, I think for far too long, particularly the last decade, people have been wearing the same swimwear. And now the turbulence of the environment has caused catastrophic change in everything we do, whether it's political, people. You cannot, and I say this, turn on a radio or a TV or pick up a paper without any reference to the current crisis. And can I also say to you, the coronavirus, or the pandemic as people want to call it, is only an example of what's happened over the last 100 years. This is not new. These crises will happen now and continue. What is different is the depth of the change, because when you go back to the 18th century and the 19th century, the machine made a massive change in business, the Luddites. And now we're finding another matter which is causing great change. It's how we respond and go forward. So the analogy of the beach is really a bit of an oxymoron, because the beach has always been seen in people's lives as a place to go to like business, but it has a lot of things which one needs to be very mindful and careful of in terms of safety.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. And Mark, I'm going to hand on over to you to talk to the idea about changes in tide. And when the tide goes out, certainly you or your business becomes exposed. You know, I mean, that is, I suppose, using this analogy, your board shorts may have fallen down to your knees. You know, the tide goes out and you become very exposed. Now, I know it seems a little bit funny, but this sort of thing happens in a business environment as well. I mean, certainly with your background in consulting, you would have seen these sort of things, I suppose, in responding to change and adapting to change. What's some of your insight with respect to that idea?
Well, firstly, this is a great metaphor for us to be using, and it does provide a lot of insights. Sailing, I think, on the oceans is how I tend to look at this particular example. And 8 out of 10 days when you go to the beach, it's pleasant, it's calm, you've got a reasonable wind, your boat can travel and you can tack and do, achieve your course. And I am reminded to say to everyone that the destination is our vision, where we're aiming to in terms of business, but the journey along the way is exciting. And it's be naive not to think that 1 out of 10 days that you're out there sailing, you're not going to hit a strong wind that's turbulent and, is going to really challenge you. And equally, 1 out of 10 days, you'd be naive to think that you're not going to be becalmed and there's not going to be any wind there to propel your boat forward. So when it comes to a business and it comes to risk management and it comes to charting your budgets going forward, it's typical to have 3 budgets, right? The base case, which is the 8 out of 10 days when we're traveling normally, the winds change, we have to do business as usual, and there's different challenges along the way. So there's the base case. With the wind strongly behind you, there's usually a best case analysis or strategy that you budget towards and you plan towards. And equally, there's going to be a day where, you're becalmed and your budget is, you're going to have to chart a worst case scenario in terms of budget and things of that nature. So look, from a business point of view, typically we all have a goal, a vision. We're charting our course accordingly. And we typically plan at least 3 scenarios, base, best, and worst case scenarios. And I think that's what the analogy is before us. I will make one point to Jim's comment when he talked about kind of a 100-year scenario, this pandemic. In 2008, the World Economic Forum put a pandemic as the 5th most likely scenario in their risk plan, their global risk plan. And that's worth having a look at, the World Economic Forum risk, Googling that and just seeing what they put at the moment. So a pandemic is no longer a black swan 1 in 100 year event. It's really what they call a grey swan, something that is occurring more frequently, should be expected, but it's quite a significant event. And it's something that we're going to experience more and more going forward, with deforestation, urbanisation and things of that nature. But it's not just the pandemic. Every business needs to identify what are the risk factors. And as we get into more and more turbulent times, the real lesson and takeaway from here as we survive and hopefully increase our market share in this environment is that as we approach more and more turbulent times, it's worth being prepared for them when they come. There are a number of players at the moment who've been, Warren Buffett sitting on a large cash reserve, ready to pounce on opportunities in the market, it's worth us thinking, not just now, but beyond this, to how do we prepare for the next turbulent times and position ourselves well to thrive, increase market share, and really succeed. A lot there, James.
Look, there certainly is. And now, our final point is this idea of being unable to control the external environment. And there's certainly within, I suppose, an internal capacity, there's levers that we can pull and changes that we can make. But outside of that, it's very much out of our control. Now, Iona, unforeseen events, responding to these changes and the external environment. Up here in front of us, we have I suppose, a very common and tried and trusted framework that we use for analysing the external environment, which is the PESTEL framework. It covers everything from, politics to environmental to legal. You could talk us through that and some of your insight responding to unforeseen changes and the external environment as a whole.
Look, I think we're on that beach that we were just looking at the moment, and there's turbulent water and there's big waves everywhere and the beach is being closed. It's pretty fair to say that there's a rip. And we all know about rips and currents and how dangerous they are. And every one of these things can be a rip. And every one of these are currents that affect us. Yeah. And, political environments, whether it be political unrest, whether it be political decisions, economic circumstances can greatly affect our operations, and external influences on any business operation will often encourage us to look inward as well and look at our internal processes. Socio-demographic changes can affect us in many, many ways, and our human resources base, for example, that we have in our human capital can be deeply affected by socio-economic factors at any time. Changes in people's lives often impact the way people work, which in turn impacts our productivity and our outputs as far as an organisation is concerned. Technological changes are continuous. We know this. We know that things are changing greatly out there in the world. All we have to do is look at the changing world of work and Industry 4.0. Environmental factors. That beach that has that rip that's there, that can, those factors can come from a variety of different places. And each one of these things, of course, will have an impact on our businesses and on our operations. And it's really about how we respond to those. And can we respond intuitively? Do we really understand what our business does? And do we really understand what our goals are? And how can we take an innovative approach to respond to these external challenges that really we don't have a lot of control over, because something else, like, for example, we've used the pandemic as an example, but there could be a range of other things that could be affecting, our external environment.
Yeah, look, I think it's a really nice analogy that you make, that every one of these elements that we've got up here in front of us, represents a rip, it represents a current. Jim, I mean, you've spent a lot of time on the beach, and certainly this isn't the first time that we've seen individual elements all come together, or one big event affecting all of these different individual elements.
Well, that's the interesting thing. See, as we were saying, we go to the beach and we make assumptions. We look at things such as weather reports, we look outside, we pack our lunch, and we take money, and we make sure all of those things. That's to get to the beach. But unfortunately, when we're looking at these external factors, when you actually get there, things could have changed and will change. And they'll change in a moment in time. And as Mark was saying, some days may be just perfect. But if we look at business as not a day-by-day proposition, you look over time and you see that, like the beach analogy, these things cause great change to you responding to go back to the beach. And so we don't have much control over a lot of these external environmental issues, but we need to be very aware of what impact they have on our business. And that's what's really critical. And in a moment, we're going to look at the internal ones. and see how they play a very important role. And one of the things that Mentor tries to do in its educative process is to challenge people's thinking, that people think objectively about who they are, what they're trying to achieve, and the courses that they do. And that's no different to looking now at these internal matters that influence the end of the day. For example, James, if I may say, and I might just talk about a couple of these if I can, I'm always very, very aware when we look at accounting and we look at tax implications, because they demonstrate and reflect performance. They give us an idea about performance in what we call a quantitative sense. And I just put down here a note, and I want to challenge our people here. When we look at performance, we need to look at the performance of liquidity, leverage, the operational and the efficiency associated with the business. And many businesses don't do it. They struggle to go day by day, week by week. And yet you need a systematic approach to look at those key economic indicators that tell you what you're doing with your business. Give me a set of accounts, I'll tell you how your business is. It's like going to the doctor. He will tell you what's wrong with you when certain tests are applied. And that's really critical with regards to looking at your business. Do you really know those metrics? Do you really know how they're performing? Because that then extends to looking at things such as margins, growth, and valuation. And I don't care what business you're in, you need to know those things because they are critical on the foreshores of the beach. You need to know the performance, and that's very critical. And if I can just say, not only within the business, but you need to look at that within the unit, within the business. You need to look at that at the industry level with benchmarking and so on. And that's what Mentor tries to say. It says, look, you cannot live in an introspective world with business. We can control these things, but we need to have the knowledge to do those things. And that's really critical. I know there's other things I can talk about, but I wanted to just make some comment with regards to accounting. Do you really understand what the story is being told? Do you understand the conditions of the beach?
Yeah, look, and I think it's a very good point that you make there. I mean, the accounting scorecard or report card really is a bit of an indicator as to where you're sitting, which then sort of brings us onto this idea of elements of a business that are within your control and levers that you can pull and changes that you can make. Mark, I'll get you to talk to some of the points up here, and it could be changes that you make on your technology and systems, changes to your marketing and sales process. Obviously, making those changes and responding to that scorecard, which Jim just referenced, with respect to accounting and I suppose the numbers that come out of that.
Thanks, James.
Yes,
I was just, look, I think exactly what Iona said about the PESTEL analysis, which is external analysis, and what Jim's now talking about, the internal analysis, the strengths and weakness of an organisation. From a real practical takeaway for our viewers, our listeners, you need time to talk about these things with your team. The most practical way, most large organisations will have a risk management team meeting, and once a month as a minimum is an opportunity to sit together over a lunch, however you want to do it, with your team to talk about what are these external factors, these internal factors, and start to think about scenarios. So that thinking process prepares, you can look at the World Economic Forum and look at the top risks. You can, each year they've published what the Australian CEOs are identifying as their top risks. And they are talking about external factors, and they're talking about internal factors. Technology, for example, cybersecurity is a real risk. We've got a large number of organisations that have been impacted in a significant way by not just theft of intellectual property, but ransomware and blackmail and things of that nature. Being prepared for that scenario. Marketing, this is a highly competitive world. People are going, are challenging us not just with incumbents and dominating market share and being innovative and the like, but a whole range of new innovative organisations coming up and beating us on product right? Innovation in product, and not just on product, but in reach, in the ability to communicate with different cohorts, different buyer personas of young, Z-Gen or millennials or the like. Human resources, a large number of organisations right now, Atlassian is a good example. They're going hard in the market. They realise lots of companies are pulling the brakes on at the moment, and they're going out recruiting all those people that feeling insecure or perhaps have even lost their job to get the best talent. Accounting, as Jim says, it's all about responsive accounting, the ability to actually make budgets on the fly. In this, we can't predict when the next emergency will happen, what the next emergency will be called in our business, but having a business continuity plan that immediately creates a war room, that immediately identifies the scenarios, best case, worst case, current case, putting cash flows towards it, working towards that. That's really the type of thing that are the takeaways for our listeners today. It's about, can't have the answers, can't predict what's going to happen, but what you can do is put business processes in place to think about this, prepare in mind, and if an emergency does occur, react fast.
Now, look, reacting and responding to this change, and Iona, you operate in a CEO capacity, so leadership's a big part of your role, and certainly leading an organisation and what is essentially a group of people to respond to these changes is absolutely crucial. We've got a couple of things up there by way of measurement and management, and then people and human capital planning. Now, those two elements, I think, contribute quite strongly and play a large part in, what is to be perceived, essentially a leadership role, and then in responding to these three meta swells or these, multiple currents and rips, which we've identified a little bit earlier on. What are your thoughts on that, certainly from a CEO and leadership perspective?
I honestly believe that turbulent times like we have at the moment are opportunities. And if we approach a time of challenge as an opportunity, often it opens up our thinking. What else can we do? How can we do this differently? Can we change an internal system? Is this an opportunity to upskill our staff? Is this an opportunity to bring in new staff because we've identified an opportunity? We can look at our product life cycles and we can say to ourselves, what do we do with our product? Maintaining, current relevance in any market is incredibly important. And without having those conversations, and without having those conversations at every level of an organisation, and looking at processes and looking at process improvements, and looking at internally at our own efficiencies, we will often miss that opportunity that could have been there, that we really could have jumped off with. So measurement and management and quality management is incredibly important, and responding to people with good human capital planning, looking at not necessarily our strengths, but looking at those areas that there are opportunities in. Can we, change our approach? And do we need additional people to do that? Can we redeploy people? And can we change up job families and teams and create multidiscipline teams and multidiscipline positions? There's a lot of opportunity for growth in a challenging time. It's about understanding who you are as an organisation, and then it's about taking that knowledge and making it relevant in a marketplace. And the conversation and listening to your market and keeping in touch with your market. Future planning is probably almost like having a crystal ball in a time when everything's turbulent. But what we do know is that there are always solid core elements of anything we do, and our market as well. And if we're responding to that, I draw on Toyota's experience in the last recession in 2008, where they introduced a whole range of new cars. They didn't discount them. They marketed them as being good value for money. And the Camry, for example, a lot of people still drive that same Camry, and they were good products. They were reasonably priced, and they were actually marketed to the family market as being something that was quality and that would last for a long time. And sure enough, they have. How many of those Camrys do we still see on the road? And we can learn a lot from that experience. And that again is about knowing our product, knowing our market, knowing who we are, knowing what we do, and really drilling down into your organisation and developing that knowledge. Would you like to add some input there, Mark?
Look, like Toyota, Lacey, and again, if I use that example, they're offering free collaboration software at the moment to the market. Why? Because one, it's part of the social contract with the market that they'll do good in a time of need in terms of market requirements. But long term, of course, everyone who uses that collaborative software gets through the barrier of entry, will keep using it and provide annuity income in terms of monthly subscriptions. So there is an opportunity, as Ina was saying, in terms of from a pricing point of view, from a market share point of view, to sit back with your team and reflect on not just the difficulties that a situation like COVID can present, or any crisis, whatever it might be, but what opportunities might be there for us to develop. How do we respond and react, taking with us the social contract we've got with our cohort of customers and really seeing them who they are and their challenges and difficulties, and customizing our solutions or solutions for them that actually propel us forward and improve their quality of life. And in education, this is about better job outcomes, courses that are actually aligned to Industry 4.0 and the future of work and things of that nature. But in your industry, every one of our listeners, it's about really thinking about what are the opportunities. These type of situations accelerate trends. So if we respond well now, we're well positioned as things settle down into the new normal to continue with that acceleration of trends and do really well for ourselves and for our customers.
Now, Jim, handing on over to you in this idea of being a pricing maker or taker, and this is an idea that came up yesterday, you know, and this idea of opportunities for growth and acquisitions. You've obviously run a successful financial services business for a vast number of years and would have seen all sorts of external environments and responded to it. Talk to me a little bit more about this idea of being a pricing maker or taker. And second to that, this opportunity for growth. Acquiring a book, for example, is a common financial services business growth strategy. I mean, is now a good time to be thinking about that? Because certainly to a lot of people out there, it might seem somewhat counterintuitive if there's a lot of uncertainty out there.
Thanks, James. Can I give a couple of thoughts and reflections first before I answer those? Because I always like questions. And I put these questions and I hope that they resonate with our listeners. And I know that they will. And it's really a segue into those two parts. It's really critical. How does life change now for your customers? You need to understand that at a very deep level. The life of our customers has changed dramatically. And you need to be aware of that. So while you're working on the product or service, you need that human element associated with how has this impacted on their lives? And I don't care what it is. You only have to see what's happened with going to doctors now under the whole digital process of what that's done for people and so on. Secondly, every action is communication. Every action that you do is a form of communication. And I don't care what it is, it tells part or all of a story. I hope people understand the magnitude of what I'm really trying to say to people. Every action in your business tells a story. It is a form of communication. And two other things, what do you let go now? In your business, what do you let go? And the fourth question in the context of those two aspects is, what is your differentiator in business? What is your differentiator? And if you've got a staff and a whole range of people, other stakeholders and shareholders, what is it that makes you different? That is really critical question. And if we look at the whole education world today, that is a very burning issue with regards to what they're doing itself. So one of the taglines that's really critical, are we price makers or takers, is really critical. But my point would be there is, we never apologize for quality. So the price is immaterial if quality satisfies the utility of your customers. And that goes back to those questions I was saying. Yes, there are competitive industries that you've got to drop your price and do all those things. But that shouldn't be the only driver that controls your price. You have to differentiate yourself in the market. I don't care what it is. Mercedes still has one of the highest levels in terms of sales. Why? And so for me, price maker and price taker is critical, but what are you doing to get your cost side down? And that's what we're talking about, the performance indicators with regards to accounting, to give you that leverage in price maker or taker. What is your profit margins? What are you giving up? In terms of opportunities for growth, I think it's a fantastic time. You only have to see what IKEA did 2 days ago. They've now moved into the big energy market. Why? Because of their branding. But everyone thought they were just selling household goods. More and more businesses will jump the fence and move into very horizontal and vertical types of businesses in the supply chain. And that's going to become more and more critical. And I don't care what it is, you will see more and more things being available. So James, when you ask me, depending on my age and where I was and what I'm trying to do, and I shouldn't use age, but I'm saying if you're in your 30s and 40s with your business and you want to grow, you can only grow organically and or through acquisition. It's a fantastic time to grow through acquisition if you've got your storyline right. Really critical. I find it an absolute amazing time to grow a business. Is it challenging? Absolutely. And when you use the analogy of the turbulence, you need to make sure that you've swum, that you have the right technique, you've done all those things to ensure that you try and mitigate that swell that's building up and building up. And as I say, I've never been more excited about business. And acquisition is certainly a very good way to do. For example, in financial services, for everyone wanting one business, there's 8 for sale. There's got to be an opportunity there for people who may not see that opportunity. So for me, I look for those things, those clues that can help me grow the business.
So there's certainly an opportunity for growth there, and perhaps final points in this particular section is this idea of defining or redefining your business and coming out of arguably what's quite a challenging time. On the other side, businesses who do survive and who do respond will be fitter, stronger and leaner and better prepared to operate, I suppose, in an environment that's conducive to business success than those who have failed to adapt and change. Some of the risks, of course, with redefining and jumping forward and taking, I suppose, advantage of these opportunities, perhaps by acquisition, is a risk to cash flow. And we touched again on this a little bit yesterday. I mean, with any business, cash flow is king. And that's getting back to this idea of accounting and our report card for a business and how far forward can we go? What is your business runway? Mark, I'm going to just get you to come in on this one and talk to us a little about this idea of a business runway. What constrains it? How long can it be? And are there ways for us to actually extend it so that we can take advantage of opportunities in this environment and ensure that we're in a position to do so not just now, but also in the future?
It's interesting, like a number of people will be listening at the moment thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful to have cash at the moment? Wouldn't it be wonderful to take advantage of acquisition opportunities, and thinking to themselves, but I can't. My hand is constrained. You know, I'm actually just struggling to get everything working day to day with limited resources, given the way cash flow has been affected. And to you, I would say that time is on your side, right? Enough, you know, patience and perseverance through this time, and you know, doing what's required as best as you can, seeking advice as best you can, freeing up cash, doing those things is critical. When I say time's on your side, what I'm saying is that this isn't the first crisis that you've probably gone through from a business perspective. It won't be the last. This is really an opportunity to learn and take away lessons of what you would do and be prepared in future. You know, for 4 or 5 years, people have been talking about things being overpriced, and we've had a run in Australia of, you know, an unbelievable run of no recessions, you know, over 2 decades. It's been quite phenomenal, but, you know, the warnings have been there, the obvious impact that things weren't always going to be rosy, clear sailing, you know, were very clear. So what are the takeaways for us now is really critical. What would we do again, the lessons learned, and then how would we be prepared for future events is really critical. It's very hard when you're in the midst of it. Cash flow is king, yeah, very clearly that's the case. But the best way perhaps to create cash flow is, to Iona's point earlier, is to be a price taker, to actually take charge of the market, give the market, be aligned to the market, respond to the market, and do the very best that you can in this moment to really generate business opportunities that are actually there in a time when most people are running around just battling with business as usual. Take a bit of time out, talk to people, consolidate your thoughts, think about what the opportunities are at hand, as Jim was saying. Plan your timeline. Your planning horizon at the moment is much shorter because, you know, things are turbulent in this metaphor of the turbulent oceans. We're not sure what the next wave is going to be like, so we're actually planning, you know, not necessarily 3 years ahead, not a year ahead, not even 6 months ahead or a quarter ahead. We're perhaps even planning just a week ahead in this moment. So you need to be able to come together, maybe even on a daily basis with your emergency team, even if it's just yourself and your accountant, or yourself and your trusted executives, and think about, what am I going to do this week to respond to the market? The market's changing. You know, last week, everyone was working from home. Next week, people can be starting to transition into home. And so it's changing on a day-by-day basis. It's unpredictable. So it's really about the process now. You know, a bit of time to not just respond, but to reflect. A bit of time, not just to act, but to think and talk with people and plan out what's going to happen tomorrow and the next week. Stress testing, contingency planning. Well, we're in the midst of things at the moment, but one of the big takeaways is to plan. You know, if working from home is going to be a contingency plan going forward, well, home is now your second office. We're going to have to make sure we have health and safety in the workplace and in the home place. You have to make sure that cybersecurity in the workplace is the comparable, you know, in home and things of that nature. But there are other contingency plans, having a bit of reserve of cash for this event. And we can, you know, a reserve of cash can be a buffer, say, you know, getting all your accounts payable down under 30 days so that in a crisis time, it can actually expand to 60 days or even 90 days if required. Paying down, having lines of credit. You know, Amazon's raced out there now and obtained $10 billion worth of credit at 2.4% rate because the interest rates are low. They can do it, right? But a number of us could have also created lines of credit 6 months ago, a year ago, in need. Making sure our contingent liabilities are all down, statutory obligations are down, making sure that we don't have big liabilities in terms of, you know, 10 weeks of annual leave to certain people, you know, 3 years worth of annual leave, you know, bringing those things down. They're the type of things that you can do in terms of contingency. And that's what the monthly risk management plan can be all about, where you sit down with your team and think about, well, where are things changing, you know, in the world? What can we actually do and think about to put ourselves in as good a position as possible to think these things through. And also, you know, when you've done your SWOT analysis, your vision and your business plan, you know, you're going to have strategic initiatives, plans going forward. They're usually 3-year horizons, things of that nature. Well, you know, you allocate budgets to it, you put reserves away for that. Sometimes you can accelerate those because opportunities are presented like they may be now, or sometimes you actually, you know, ratchet them down, right? So that, you know, because, you know, you want to preserve your cash flow and you can do that, but your long-term strategic initiatives towards your vision keep on going. That's what you do for stress testing and contingency planning, James.
Yeah, look, you make an interesting point there, and certainly Australia's had fantastic business environments and unprecedented growth for 30 odd years. And I'm going to hand on over to you, Iona, in just a moment to, I suppose, continue on with this idea of stress testing and contingency planning. And for those of you who work in financial services, you'll be very familiar with the past performance is no indicator of future performance, and something you're very versed in, I'm sure. But we've had 30 years of, you know, very good business environments. Every 6 months, every 12 months, every 3 months, there's naysayers coming out saying it's going to crash, it's all going to fall apart. And that's been the case since day one. But all of a sudden it's happened, you know, for the first time. So I suppose getting back to this idea of unprecedented, you know, negative impacts or grey swan events or black swan events, how can we put our organisation in a position where we are able to viably stress test and contingency plan for things that are unknown? I mean, nobody's got a crystal ball out there.
I think it's very true, James. None of us have a crystal ball, and if anybody has one, I'd like to borrow it, please. In all seriousness, I think what we can do though is we can look at the changes that are occurring now, and we can almost plan over different periods. So we can look at a short-term response, we can look at our medium term and our longer term. And one of the things that we should constantly be doing at the moment, and in this type of environment, is constantly reviewing our strategy. Do we need to change something? Do we need to respond to something? Has there been a change that we need to be aware of? What do we need to put in place to respond to that change? Whether that be we change the timeline on something, whether we, you know, to use an agile term, whether we take a project and we put it in the fridge. How do we do this? Do we need to look at our methodologies? Do we need to adopt a different competitive system so we're measuring our performance in a different way? Do we actually need to look at, you know, for example, a mixture of Lean and Six Sigma when we're actually looking at our quality planning? The things that we need to do are very obviously paying attention to what could be a change in the short term, what could be a disruptor in the short term. Excuse me. At the moment, for example, we have internal travel restrictions within Australia that are affecting many things. But we also have international travel restrictions. So those two things affect us at different times. Yeah, one will affect us over a longer period of time and the other one over a shorter period of time. So we need to have in place ways to consider how we respond to that. We need to be constantly reviewing our performance, our outputs, what the market's telling us, because often the market will create its own solution. And we need to be in touch with that. But we also very, very carefully need to constantly be reviewing our strategy. And I'm sure Mark could add more things to strategy review.
Excellent, thank you very much. Now, Jim, we've got a point up there, and that's about having a lifeguard at your beach. And then sort of following up from that, you know, is this idea of the business plan timeline. And certainly, I mean, as Iona just alluded to, I mean, you really can't, you know, I mean, you can prepare for the unexpected, but you can't know what it's going to be. So how effective is a 30, 60, 90, you know, 2-year, 3-year or 5-year business plan going to be? Certainly in this environment, you know, it could be argued that a business plan which has got a runway any longer than, say, 2 years is really wishful thinking.
I tend to agree with that, to be perfectly honest. I think the whole notion around 5-year plans, they're fantastic, but they're predicated on assumptions that I think are somewhat and could be shaky. I mean, it has a lot of merit, but it's got to be in a general way. I'm a type of person that likes in fact, I like weekly goals. I plan daily, and I even nearly plan hourly. I'm very task orientated, and I'm very disciplined with regards to getting outcomes. And so you need to know, see, it raises a whole range of questions that you're talking about in terms of your business. You need to know where you've got to go. The roadmap has to be able to be very clear. And not only do you need to understand it, other people need to understand it. That's what's so critical about the roadmap. Quite often we'll say, we're so passionate about things, we go, don't you see that? And the other person will say no. And so communication is so critical, and it's not about what you understand, it's what they understand. And that's, I find a lot of people in business make assumptions, and I think quite often they're fairly empty with regards to things. So coming back to it, I have goals for myself, tasks that have got to be done, and I also need to understand the behaviour of other people. And I'll say this to you because it's really critical for me. I have a big appetite for work. Lots of you all do. But in order for me to get something done by Friday, I need to understand that that person is going to do that once I pass the baton on. And that is really critical, because that will break down my process if I don't get it back on Friday. And I think people need to understand the psychology of that behavior. It's no good me doing something Tuesday night till 3 o'clock in the morning and just sending it off and hope that they're going to send it Friday. If it's important for a presentation, for a sale, for those marketing techniques, for a convention or whatever. And so for me, that task goes back to you, the business person. Don't assume that other people work in the same vein that you do and the same outcomes. You need to build that relationship. And it's interesting, James, one of the things that's been in the literature in the last couple of weeks is the whole philosophy around the framework, scale versus what we call customer intimacy. And that's a very interesting concept. Scale, and that's brought about by a whole range of metrics that you try to get greater economies of scale. But they're saying, at what level is customer intimacy part of that? So my thoughts to our listeners is, how do you look at those relationships in that intimacy of your clients? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who pay you. And that's really critical in what I'm talking about, this whole area of making sure with regards to plans, what is it you're planning for? And then you're very vigilant. And we can talk about it's got to have flexibility and all that. My view is you need to make sure what you're doing. As I said before, when you look at Usain Bolt, when he was at his peak, he had 8 people helping him to improve by 0.01 of a second, because it was worth millions of dollars. So the point I'm trying to make is that those people who are in the position of controlling something need to not only have their own vision, but they need to understand the behavior of those other people in that group. And that's not only internally, that's externally. For example, I've got a situation where something happened that I needed done, and this is a real story, and an event has taken place in a person's life that means that they won't be there for probably 2 to 3 weeks. Now, what happens?
Well, that's right. And look, I think sort of going on your point now, I mean, we've arrived at this point where we've, I think, identified really what, contributes to this analogy of turbulent waters. We've identified what it means to have the most appropriate swimwear on, or obviously turning up to the beach on the right day, or making sure that you've got the most appropriate costume for the environment. A big part of this series, which we have, and before I hand on over to Mark and I have some closing thoughts and a bit of a summary on some lessons for everybody to take away, I know you'd like to leave listeners and viewers with some questions to think about, certainly between now and the next time we have an opportunity to catch up. And I dare say you've got a couple there in front of you. So before I do hand on over to Mark and Iona, what sort of questions or thoughts would you like to leave with our viewers and listeners today?
Me,
Yeah,
James?
over to you,
I'd only
Jim.
like you to, I'm going to really challenge everybody today, including myself. And here's the question: individually and at the organisational level, what do you think you're good at? Because the market will tell you.
Well,
That's the question I really want you to unpack. In your business, what do you think you're good at? That's one side of the ledger. Now let's look at how that is in the marketplace, because they're saying something else. So there's a mismatch in the storyline. There may not be, but what I'm saying to you, the takeout for me today with regards to these lessons learned is, what do you think you're good at? And then look at all those things that we've talked about today, because they're the signals, they're the things that tell you what you think you're good at.
Well, the market will certainly let you know. And Mark, closing thoughts for today?
Look, the basic fundamentals are there, right? Have those conversations with your team on a regular basis. So your business planning, your risk planning strategy conversations, at least once a month, ideally every week. The best business people I've ever seen every morning are catching up with their trusted advisors for a coffee, whatever it might be, but just going through what that process might look like. The takeaway would be SWOT. Identify your strengths, as Jim says. Think about your weaknesses in your organisation in these conversations, and what strategies to overcome those weaknesses. And with your strengths, what strategies you can do to actually exploit those strengths. Look at the threats, the trends that are occurring in the place, and you can't predict them all, but there are some obvious ones that are going to accelerate. On a positive side, automation is clearly going to be an opportunity is going to just grow and grow. So you can predict that will continue to increase. And a threat, pick cybersecurity, for example. You know that cybersecurity threats are going to increase as well over time. So you can predict your opportunities and your threats to some extent, but through lots of discussion, or as Iona would call a catch ball, with passing the talking stick or the ball between different people in your organisation to actually think about what they might be and how it would impact your organisation. From understanding your SWOT, you can really develop those strategic initiatives that will take you forward. Some will be short-term, some will have medium-term horizons, some will have long-term horizons. Do as Jim talks about. Think about your 90-day flight plan, what you're going to do in the short term as those micro steps to achieving your strategic goals. But those strategic goals, just a handful of them, should be aligned to those trends, right? So you take advantage of your strengths and the future of work or automation that's going forward, and those strategic initiatives are the things that you work towards step by step, month by month, year by year, to achieve your final destination, which is, on the sailing metaphor, is where you're actually sailing towards. But that journey as you go is the fun bit, and there will be turbulent times, but be prepared as best you can.
And finally, over to you, Iona, for some closing thoughts for today.
I guess my thoughts at the end of this session are really, don't go swimming on a dangerous beach without somebody with you. We can't work in any enterprise or entity or business without other people, and our human capital are just that. And as Mark said, I'm a firm believer in a thing called catchball, which is where we throw the ball to other people and we get them to throw an idea back. And often we underestimate the value of our people and the depth of their knowledge and their energy and what they can offer us. Again, I come back to challenges or opportunities, and often by working all the way through, with all of that wonderful capital that we've invested in our people, we can find the responses to those opportunities. And so again, don't go swimming on a dangerous beach without anybody with you. Take your whole team with you. And if you do have a gap in your team, bring somebody in. Yeah, that goes back to, the lifeguard principle and everything else. And what we can discover is that by just thinking a little bit or taking some of those restraints away where, we have to make a decision or we believe that we've got the answer, I can guarantee you that it's probably somebody that's in an entry-level position who may actually just have one of those great ideas that you can take, develop the person with, develop the capital, the human capital in your organisation, and you won't be on that beach. You won't be dragged out by that rip and you won't drown.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, look, it's certainly been very informative for myself. And if there was, I think, any ideas or themes to summarise what's been a very insightful and detailed conversation and discussion today, is this idea of being self-aware as an individual, but also as a business, being aware of what's going on, put a little bit of planning into place, teamwork, and then, of course, communication. And I think if you bring all of these elements together, then you are in a position to, and a term which has been used very, quite a lot recently, is this idea of pivoting. And it is only by being sort of an agile, fluid organisation, which is supported through good communication, that you're able to do that. So once again, thank you everybody for joining us today. Jim, Mark, Iona, thank you very much for your time and insight. Thank you very much to everybody who's tuned in today. And we look forward to speaking with you again on the next Business Insight series. If you'd like more information about this, please head on over to our Facebook page or our webpage, where you'll be able to download a version of this live webinar, and that's mentor.edu.au. So once again, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
James.
Hi, James. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Mark.